So today I'm going to write a new tune using my Mechanical Techno extended turntable setup, and I'm going to go through the process step by step to show how it all works. So you can see so far I've just got the turntable and the modular setup. Up on the left there is the laptop, and that's just running Reaper with 4 mono channels and 2 stereo channels going into it. So I'll set up the turntable and I'll show you on the modular how I'm patching it as I go. I'm going to go first into a mono to stereo switch, just with the phono cables. Leave it set to mono, and I'm just going to take one of the outputs into the phono preamp. Guess I need to decide what I'm going to put in the signal chain to begin with. So I reckon I'll just go for a mono signal into a high pass filter first to take off some of the rumble that might come through on the bottom end. And I'm actually going to go into a delay as well, and then let's see how that sounds with the record on. I'm going to use one of the modified records that I make. This is actually a white label of an album I recorded with Colin Webster. Let's give that a listen. I'll set a counterweight on the tone arm so that it doesn't slide all the way to the middle whilst it's playing. Looks like this needle's dead, so I'm going to have to switch up for another one. Let's change the delay a little bit. Just to demonstrate quickly how that mono switch changes the sound. So I'm going to bring a mono synth in next, and for that I'm going to use this module, which is the mono comb. All this does is takes values of resistance and uses this switch array to generate like an acid bass line. So I've got the basic physical setup sorted now. The reason it has to go on second on the tower really is because it tends to be a bit too wonky to be able to play effectively. It needs to be fairly precise, and the higher up the tower you go, the more wonky it gets. First thing I'm going to do is just put in a random short little sequence so that I can hear the notes being played as I'm kind of tuning what the sound is going to be. And I've got a choice that I can either use the ball bearings for really short notes or the plastic arc segments if I want longer sustain on each note. Here's a quick sequence then, and I'm just going to leave this running while I patch something in. As you can see on the module, I've got pitch, envelope, gate and trigger all coming out, so I'll start with the pitch, send that to an oscillator, and then do something with the trigger and the gate probably as well. So here's most of the synth section. I'll just start by bringing the pitch in. I'm taking the gate out from the module so that I can send that to an envelope generator. And the envelope's probably going to go to the VCA as well as the filter. And I'll send that to the second mono channel on the digital interface. Okay, let's open up that filter and start playing around and see what kind of sound we can get. The pitch range is quite wide at the moment. I can change the pitch range on the module. So I'm not really feeling either the sound or the sequence there, but let's program a new pattern in whilst the original sample is playing and see if we can get it to sound any better. So that took quite a lot more messing than I was expecting, but I've got something that sounds okay-ish, I think, at the moment. Let's get some drums on and see how it sounds with some other kind of sounds mixed in. My plan here is for this to be a kick drum, just doing a 4/4 beat. I'm not going to sort the sound out yet, I'm just sorting out the trigger at the moment. Next up I'm going to put a optical reflection sensor on and probably going to use that as a hi-hat sound, but again, I'll tune the sound in a second. So I'm going to take a patch from the optical reflection sensor, put that into a gate to trigger, and take that for now straight into the 909 hi-hat, probably the closed hat for this sound. And I'll mix all the drums into this Erica Synths mixer module, which is great for drums as it has a compressor on it already, and take that out into the third channel of the sound card. The bass drum trigger is this orange cable going into the first of the 4 contact mic preamps, and then that's going to go to the kick drum module using a splittable cable so that I can send it to some percussion as well, and then I'll stick those both into the mixer. So now I'm going to run that pattern, tweak the triggers a little bit to make sure that they're setting off properly, and then I'll mix the drum sounds a little bit as well. Next I need to adjust each of the layers in relation to each other and see how they sound, so I'm going to stick the other channels on and give it a run. So I feel like that's getting somewhere, but I'm going to try an offbeat hi-hat as well, perhaps a bit more percussion, and see where we end up. The plan for that extra hi-hat is to use the same trigger that the kick drum is using, but I'm just going to rotate it by 45 degrees on the same layer. There's one minor change that I want to make to the hi-hat sound, and that is if I take the gate output from the bass drum trigger and put that into the accent in the hi-hat patch, it kind of mutes it a little bit each time the bass drum hits, and I think that gives it a bit more of a dynamic sound. Something else I want to just try quickly, the oscillator has a submix which will play the same pitch as what's coming through from the existing synth line, but at an octave lower. I'm going to put that into a Vactrol low pass gate. I'm going to take a trigger from the syncopated hi-hat sound and put that in on a new channel to give us a second sort of complementary bass line. I've just patched in a delay line onto the hi-hat which triggers at the same time as the kick drum, so that gives it a bit more of a continuous 16th note pattern to the hi-hat. So I'm a good couple of hours in now and I feel like it's getting somewhere, it's sounding pretty good, and I just need to have a mess about with it for a bit before I think about what I'm going to introduce next. Okay, next up I'm going to go for some mechanical acoustic percussion. I'm going to take the output from the contact mic on the drum, put it into a contact mic preamp, through another high pass filter, and then into a stereo reverb, just to make it sound a bit less dry, because the pure contact mic can sound a bit odd in the mix otherwise. Let's see how that sounds just by itself. I'm going to have a play about with that sound a bit. I'd quite like to try and get some white noise in there with it as well. So what I might do is try and set up an envelope follower, mix some other signal in with this drum, and then send that to the mix and see how that sounds. I want to add another sound which changes over more than one cycle. So for that I'm going to add the slow platter, a secondary turntable which turns quite a lot slower, and the first thing I'm going to introduce is the MIDI comb array, which is like a MIDI version of the thing that's doing the bass line at the moment, so that I can play a MIDI synth over a longer time scale. The string synth is a stereo device, but of an idea that I want to run it through the modular system so I can trigger some of the sounds rhythmically as well. So I'm just going to take one output and then I'm going to send it into a filter. Now I've checked that's working, I'm going to run the motor slowly and then try and set up some chords. So what I'm going to do now is run the rest of the pattern and try and tune this by ear to see if I can get it to do something that sounds like it kind of fits with what's already playing. So it's sounding pretty chaotic, but I'm hoping that if I can kind of animate the sound a bit by using a filter that's rhythmically tied to the rest of the piece, hopefully that'll kind of tie it together. So looking at the pattern that I've just programmed, this one should send some longer triggers and this one will be used for a bit less emphasis. I've taken both of the triggers onto 3 and 4. Number 3 to this envelope generator, and that's going into one of the controls of the filter which the string synth is going to. This contact mic preamp has its own envelope generator in it, so that's sending a second envelope signal to the same filter. This pattern might still be quite busy, but let's give it a listen and see how it sounds. I just want to add a bit more automation to kind of offload some of the tweaking when I get to the live mix down. So what I'm going to do is add a cam follower arm onto the slow platter turntable, and I'm going to use this to control some of the other parameters in the system. To read this I'm using the resistance module, which will output a control voltage dependent on the position of the cam follower arm, and I'm going to send the output from that into the master cutoff for the mono synth. I'm not really sure how it's going to sound yet, but we'll lock it in with the rest of the mix and see how it goes. Before that though, I'm going to set up another LFO on here and use that to affect the pulse width modulation of the oscillator, see how that sounds. I'm just going to unplug some of the other outputs so that I can listen to this sound on its own and see what it's actually doing to it. So I've been making a few tweaks and a few edits, and there's one last sound that I wanted to add. So here the turntable is playing this sound, which is the sound of a drumstick on a railing. But this is being gated by the same rhythm which the bass line is playing. So that's going to be in the mix in the background as a bit more percussion. I'm going to record a take now, a live mix down of all the elements that I've built up. At this stage the mix is still very rough, but it's enough to work with. So I've finished a take I'm quite happy with, but I'm just going to record a couple of sounds back out through some stereo effects. So I'll just go into Reaper now and decide which channels I want to send back out to the modular. First thing I'm doing is just running the bass into the mixer so I can use the compressor on there. Then I'm adding some reverb to the turntable sound just to give it some stereo width. I'm running the sort of clicky sound into a stereo pair of delays. And finally the synth part is going into the cathedral stereo reverb again to give it some width. So I'm basically reamping the signals through the effects, so I just need to let it effectively render in real time, record the new tracks back in. So that's all the tracks recorded, ready to give it a quick mix down at home. Just need to tidy up here first. I'm back at home now where I usually mix and master recordings. I've got all the files on the desktop, so I'm just going to go through the process of finishing off the piece. First I want to try and make sure there's nothing clashing in the bass frequencies. I've copied the drum mix, removed it from the main mix and cut off all the top end, and I'll use that to sidechain both the 303 and the sub bass so that they won't be crowding the low end. There's a breakdown in the middle where the synth part sounded a bit harsh, so this EQ is cutting a notch out at about 1 kHz to try and mitigate that a bit. Other than that, I've tidied up the EQ on a few other channels, just cutting excessive lows and highs to get a balanced sound. I use a couple of mastering plugins on the whole mix. First, Isotope, which I like for giving some colour and enhancing the stereo width. I tend to use both the exciter and the imager fairly liberally. Then I also use this one called Panks, which gives quite an aggressive sound, and with the parallel compression dial you can really emphasise all the noisy background stuff at the same time. Usually this means tidying up noisy tracks in the quiet section or the tail, as it really amplifies this kind of thing. So the full piece is up on my channel now. There's a link in the description, or I'll put something on the screen here hopefully as well. Hope you've enjoyed watching. I may do this again. Let me know what you think if it's been of interest.